the politics of the world will also deeply impact everything that we know on the planet, including coffee. And I know in the last episode, I mentioned that it would be basically impossible for me to go to Yemen right now, or at least it would be very unsafe to go. But then this is when I want to ask the coffee industry, like, what are your values? What is special about this industry? Because I've been keeping tab of this for the last 11 months when the start of the genocide in Palestine. I've seen more people be worried about shipping delays than to be worried about genocide, literally. I've seen more coffee companies call the Houthis and Yemeni people terrorists for halting the trade in the Red Sea. And I've seen almost no one being truly vocal about why are they doing this. And this is another fault that I put on the coffee industry, is that it will deal with symptoms, but not the root causes of things.
Map It Forward Business Mastermind groups are back for 2024. And if past mastermind groups are anything to go by, you absolutely want to be a part of this if you're a business owner ready for change. Spots are limited to 10 people per group. And if you own a business in the coffee sector and are looking for support in a nurturing and focused group coaching environment, this could be the thing that helps you through these challenging times in coffee and jumpstarts your planning for 2025. There are 3 mastermind groups, each with a different business focus. I will be your coach, and the first one will be focused on strategic business planning, the second one on business growth, and the third on increasing your sales in coffee, both B2B and B2C. Groups start the week commencing October 7, and prices start at $189 per month for 3 months. You get a discount if you pay all 3 months in advance. Previous participants found these groups life-changing for their business, and all groups come with a 100% money-back guarantee. If you're interested in finding out more or registering, head to mapitforward.coffee/group coaching or check the links in the show notes for details. Welcome to the Daily Coffee Pro by Map It Forward, friends. I'm your host, Lee Safar, and I'm joined by David Rabbithole, who all of us know and love from social media. And in this series, we're talking about values-driven businesses and running a values-driven business in the coffee industry at the moment, which is a coffee crisis. In this episode, this is the episode that everybody really wants to listen to in this series, because we're going to be talking about the intersection between politics and coffee. My role in this episode specifically is to get the fuck out of David's way. So we're all here for it, David. So I want to ask you, like, what is the intersection between coffee and politics?
There's a lot to say there. I have things to say about that.
I'm so shocked by that, my friend. I'm so shocked to hear that.
If you've been following me for one post on Instagram, you know I'm ready for this question.
Word.
So, well, first of all, I think that coffee is deeply, deeply political. And this is not just me talking, because I've only just started, like, let's say in the last 2 years, to really see how different things are going to connect to coffee, whether it's on the politic front or like social justice front or environmental justice front, but like everything is connected. And this is when I was talking with Carl Winhold from Cheap Coffee. And I asked him, why do some people think that it's not political? And why is coffee political in a sense? I had an idea, but I just wanted to pick his brain a little bit. And the short answer is, he told me any negotiation basically is going to be political. And in coffee, we're negotiating all the time, because there's 2 big sides to this equation. There's consuming people, and then there's producing people. I know it's oversimplified, but just for the sake of the example. So you have one side that wants to have something, the farmer, who wants to be fairly compensated for their crop. And then you have some people who want to have the best and cheapest coffee possible to offer to their clients because it's good for their margin. So this tension here, just write this. This is enough to make everything after that kind of like political. And it's political in the sense that, if I could give one example, let's just say cup score, for example. People say, oh, what's political about cup score? Oh, I'll tell you, because it is deeply political. First of all, it's not like the cupping sheet fell from the sky and then we just had to use it. This is man-made. And there's a purpose beyond what's good acidity and what is overall good experience and what is balance and stuff like that. This has been designed to offer a definition of quality. And who controls the definition of quality? It's not the producers, it's us. And true graders would be just like the taste police in a sense. By the way, I get this often. People say just like, oh, it's because you can't be a Q grader that you whine about Q graders. I was a Q grader and I just decided not to be one anymore. And I just never did the calibrating that was necessary, right? Because I was part of that world. And I saw this mostly as a tool to have one group of people control most of the narrative about quality. But because quality is often linked to price, then this is also deeply political, because you have all this sets of decision that's coming from maybe the CQI, maybe the SCA, and then you have the cupping sheet that dictates quality. This, if it was stopping there, it's not necessarily a bad thing. It's good to be able to calibrate with people. Like this is not what I don't like about this. It's when you start linking cup score to price that you're going to be paying to farmers. And this is not okay because it's not equal. The power asymmetry, another term that I've learned from Carl, is it's so massive. So you have one group of people that can dictate what quality is, and they decide the price based on that. And I just think that this is the easiest way I can explain why I feel that coffee is political in a sense. And it's the information also that we have in the North. So it's easier for me to get a Q certification than it is for small older producers in Guatemala or in Indonesia too. So because it's more accessible to me, I will learn more about pricing, about cup quality. And this will give me more power in my negotiations if I would choose to use that power in pricing negotiations. And there's actually, I saw a little video the other day, and it made me realize that this is basically what we're experiencing in coffee. The game is called Werewolf. And it's a PhD student in sociology that came up with that game. And the game is you have a group of people, let's just say it doesn't matter, 20 people. Everybody are villagers, but you have 2 werewolves in the group. But nobody knows who the werewolves are. And then the werewolf decide who they're killing that night. And then when they wake up, they say, oh, sorry, John, you died. Then he gets out the game. But then the villagers talk amongst themselves. Don't forget, the werewolves come back as villagers when it's daytime. And then they talk. So you have the werewolves trying to pit people against killing somebody else, because now the villagers, they have to kill someone, hopefully a werewolf, right? But only 2 people in the 20 have access to the information, which is who the werewolves are, right? And I think it was something like 95% of the time, the werewolves are winning. And the werewolves win when there's only 3 villagers, I think, out of 20. But the villagers...
the game is rigged, right?
Exactly. It's rigged. It's rigged because the information and the power of decision and influencing other people's decision is not the same. And when I saw this, I thought it related really well to the coffee industry in a sense, because we have way more information, for example, as coffee buyers than some farmers would have. Some farmers don't have access to cup score, to cupping sheets. They don't really know what the difference between an 84 and an 85 and an 86 will be. So they're being told, and by being told, then the buyer expects them to agree to a certain price point, which I think this was the best example I could come up with for the podcast for why coffee is political. And some of it has to do with power asymmetry, with who knows what along the industry. Before I keep going, though, I'll just let you ask more questions, or you can come in that conversation too. I'm done ranting.
Well, the thing is, I think that's the surface level of politics that's happening in the industry. And
that was the primer.
That's the primer, right? And I think that's the gateway into helping people understand that there's a disparity in access to power. right? And when that's the case, I want people to think of that just in their own cities. If you're looking at who the poor people in your city are versus the rich people in your city are, just that is a really great way to understand the access that people end up getting to becoming equal. And it's not that we all have to have the equal outcome. It's that we do all need to consider having the equal opportunity to the kind of success that we want to be able to have. And this is when things start getting political, because is there an intentional agenda to suppress people getting equal? What is the benefit that any stakeholders may play? If we bring it back to coffee, what is the benefit that people have when the people who are growing the coffee don't get to have as much access and say as the rest of everybody else? And this really does start bringing us into where the actual fuckery about politics exists. Back to you, sir.
Yeah, no, I agree with that. And I think it's all been the same game since enslavement times and colonial times. Coffee is a deeply extractive industry. Maybe 30, 40 years ago, I think it was still not enough, but there was about 35% of the total money generated by coffee that would stay in producing coffee, give or take. So it's between 30 and 40%. But from what I've read recently and from the talks that I had with some people that are well positioned to give me an accurate number, now it will be way closer to between 10 and 20% of the total money generated by coffee staying in producing countries. So as you can see, it's kind of decreasing, right? And that's because those policies in place, whether it be cup score, whether it be how like the power asymmetry and all that, this benefits us as buyers and roasters and cafe owners, right? And this is what I mean when I say we need to break the coffee status quo, is that we need to find a way to operate outside of those political systems that have been in place to basically keep farmer poor intentionally, so that we can keep extracting more and more and keep making more money with a crop that we literally cannot produce. I can do anything that I want. Coffee is not going to grow in -30 in Canada. It's not going to happen. Like it's not a thing that's going to be possible. So it's like you said earlier in another episode, is that without the farmers, we are truly, truly nothing. There's nothing that we can do if we don't get that green bit. It's just not possible. But besides that, because of the power that we have here as coffee buyers, just from neoliberal and free market standpoints, like all this bullshit, this is just designed for one thing and one thing only, so that we can keep extracting value from origin. And this is the cycle we need to break. So we need to find alternatives as communities, as coffee buyers in cities or in countries, or to be honest, like I'm still seeking for those answers as I'm trying to talk about them. But the existing systems are truly not working, and they're making coffee not better, but even more unequal than they were a couple decades ago. And I think this is important for people to realize that all those little small bits of like, oh, it's not that big of a deal, but when you put 100, it's not that big of a deal together, it's a really big deal.
And what people don't need to understand, let me say that better. What people are not aware of is that this politics is not just producers versus the consuming end, the businesses and the consuming end. If people really understood the layers of corruption that happened at origin, if people understood the politicization of logistics, so the trucks, the quiotes, the shipping, getting your container onto a ship, finding the right partners to work with, if people understood, let's even not talk about that. Let's talk at an even more fundamental level. If people understood the way that specific groups are trying to control what agricultural inputs farmers are allowed to use and what they're not allowed to use, and how specific groups are legislating against, lobbyists are paying off the governments in different origin countries to forbid specific regenerative agricultural practices so that farmers are forced to use specific fertilizers. If people across the supply chain understood how political it is to grow this coffee, we would all be working much better together. And this is why Map It Forward is going to be focusing much more on regenerative agriculture, so that we can highlight this stuff into the future. Because folks, as I've said many, many times in many, many episodes, the future of coffee is not guaranteed. And it's not guaranteed because unless it serves the specific purpose of people in political power for it to continue to be grown, it will not continue the way that you are seeing it. Right now, it really does serve a lot of agendas for coffee to be in existence. But producers are putting up their hands and they're saying, I'm not sure that this is going to work. So, yeah.
Why would they want it to work? Because like you said, it's not just us in the north versus them in producing countries, right? You have very wealthy land and farm owners that are basically preventing smallholder farmers to reach the market if they don't go through them, those political layers. So they will just buy their cherries for cheap, and then they will make all the money of it. Like, of course, this is also something that is existing at every single layer. But when it concerns me personally, like I always think about, what can I do as a roaster to just make sure that the money that I spend on coffee will be beneficial at origin, whether it be socially, environmentally, or economically for those communities. And if we expand even like outside of the realms of coffee a little bit, is that the politics of the world will also deeply impact everything that we know on the planet, including coffee. And I know in the last episode, I mentioned that it would be basically impossible for me to go to Yemen right now, or at least it would be very unsafe to go. But then this is when I want to ask the coffee industry, like, what are your values? What is special about this industry? Because I've been keeping tab of this for the last 11 months when the start of the genocide in Palestine. I've seen more people be worried about shipping delays than to be worried about genocide, literally. I've seen more coffee companies call the Houthis and Yemeni people terrorists for halting the trade in the Red Sea. And I've seen almost no one being truly vocal about why are they doing this. And this is another fault that I put on the coffee industry, is that it will deal with symptoms, but not the root causes of things. So now the symptom of everything is that their beloved Ethiopian coffees are delayed. My Ethiopian coffee was delayed too. Would I rather have it sooner? In a perfect world, I think so. Like I would love to get my coffee sooner, but in the big scheme of things, this doesn't matter. My coffee was 2 months late. This is nothing at all. But people complain about this and they try to find a solution and they try to charge more money for alternate routes. But none of those companies have talked about why Yemeni people have started to literally try to stop and bombard ships that are Israel bound. And I think this is something that is deeply concerning, because if you even go deeper into the coffee, right? So you can't export coffee as easily, right? Okay. They say, oh, me, I want my coffee. Me. It's very self-centered, right? We have to decenter ourselves in those conversations, because you know what? Let's just say you don't want to talk about genocide. I think it's wrong, but let's just ignore this for 1 second. Your Ethiopian coffees, for an unknown reason, because the Houthis are quote unquote terrorists, which they are not. The Houthis, by the way, are just doing what the Genocide Convention is telling them to do, is to stop it. They're trying their best to just try to stop it, right?
It's activism.
Exactly. So let's just not even think about that. So Ethiopian copies are late. People will say, oh, this is terrible. They cancel their contracts. They go to other origin to fulfill their needs because they don't want to wait 2 or 3 months, right? There's a lot of people in Ethiopia that just lend their coffees to export companies, and they only get paid with interest when the coffee hits the ship. But now that coffees cannot hit the ship, so who do you think suffer from all of this? It's always going to go back to the farmers, because you have the luxury to break your contract because of delays and find another coffee to fit your menu. Farmers do not have that opportunity. So now you will have farmers that are going to be paid 2, 3, 4, 5 months later, or literally you'll have farmers that will not be able to sell their coffees. And now they're going to receive their coffees back with no buyers. And then they have to plan for the next harvest, right? So when we say coffee is political, it's because of all of those layers, whether it's just coffee related, like cup score, or where it's the bigger, the bigger realm of the entire planet, literally. And people need to start incorporating a little bit more of coffee activism. And this episode is probably way too long already, but I have just like one other example to explain how coffee is political. So being political, I think, is about decision. It's about power. It's about what certain groups of people are going to be doing. When it was the World of Coffee event, I think it was in Poland. I think it was 3 years ago. Maybe it's 2 years ago. I forgot. But this World of Coffee happened, I think, a month or so after Russia invaded Ukraine.
3 years ago.
The SCA had a big meeting overnight. They called it extraordinary. They've never done something like this before. They all gathered together and they decided that 100% of the proceeds from World of Coffee would go to Ukraine, to certain orgs to help the coffee community in Ukraine directly. Do I think it's great that they did that? Obviously, I think it's fantastic that they could take this political stance to say, this is what we need to be doing as an industry. But then there was World of Coffee in Dubai, I think, recently. And was it Dubai?
Mm-hmm.
Yeah. And this was right along the time when the genocide in Palestine was happening. What did we hear about that? From the SCA, from the coffee community? Crickets. Nothing. Why didn't all the proceeds from World of Coffee Dubai go straight to Palestinian orgs to help them there? They brew coffee there, if that helps you sympathize with them. There used to be beautiful coffee houses and coffee culture there. But now it's not the case. And I could go on and on for like a full 5 episode about that. But this is what I want people to understand, is that those types of decisions are deeply political. And if we can decide to do something from one group of person but ignore the other, we also have the power to do something for more people and for everybody. This is just what I want people to get from this whole segment, is that everything is a choice in a certain sense. And we decide where the money goes, and we decide where we get engaged in, and we can do more than what we've been doing recently.
I want to, because if Yanis or anyone from the SCA is listening to this, they're going to be yelling at their speakers right now saying what I'm about to tell you. And I want people to understand these business models. So a number of years ago, the reason the SCA exists is because the SCAA, the Specialty Coffee Association of America, merged with the Specialty Coffee Association of Europe, the SCAE. They came together to form the SCA, Specialty Coffee Association, which is supposed to be a global organization. World of Coffee is what was happening in Europe, and Expo was what was happening in America.
Yep.
Those two shows are still owned by the SCA. So the World of Coffee in Europe goes to different European countries every year. The SCA owns that show, and the SCA owns Expo. But what people may not know is that the SCA does not own the World of Coffee in the Middle East, which is currently in Dubai, and they do not own the show that is in Asia. They have franchised that out.
Okay.
And
I didn't know that.
And which is why I'm like, look, I am deeply concerned by the practices of some of the shit that I'm seeing. Well, not the practices, the silence that's coming out of the SCA at the moment is deeply concerning to me. I don't understand why they're not talking about a coffee crisis, why they're not coming out and talking about a whole lot of this stuff, right? But I am somebody who will happily, like when I know that people are doing things that are the right things, or why they do know, like what the reasons are behind things, I'm always stepping up and explaining them. And this is why the SCA, to talk about why they did what they did for Ukraine, is because they owned that show. But they don't own Dubai. And because they don't own Dubai, what they could have done was say, we're going to, this is the scenario. We franchise this show out, but we're going to take all the proceeds that we make from this show and we're going to give them to Palestine. That's what could have happened. I think that we have a fundamental issue here, bringing the politics into the point of this episode is about politics, right? The SCA itself is highly politicized.
Yes.
And the practices of the SCA are highly politicized. Folks, I would deeply fucking encourage you to go take a look at the board of the SCA, and please ask yourself the question, who sits on the board of the SCA? I'm going to cop a lot of shit from everybody that's on the board of the SCA, and I don't care. Please go and take a look at who are the companies that they work for. And there is an equipment manufacturing company that has 3 members that sit on the board of the SCA right now. And they have other board members who are brand ambassadors for them in their local businesses. And this is when politics is a real problem with regards to our industry. It's a real problem for all of the other reasons that we spoke about. But if you're talking about people who are, a barista or a coffee roaster, and they don't really get to engage in the supply chain the way that you and I do, David, and all they really get to see is the scope of, well, I buy courses of the SCA, so I don't know how I can be more politically engaged. Well, what you can do is that turns the SCA into a supplier for you. If you are buying a course of the SCA, they are your supplier, and you are an independent employee within yourself. You are purchasing products for your own professional development. I think you should hold your supplier accountable. I think that you should ask them questions. The SCA is not a bad entity. They can do better. And we need to hold them accountable to doing better. Otherwise, there needs to be a different name than the Specialty Coffee Association. Because the title, the Specialty Coffee Association, suggests that they are a representative for trade in specialty coffee.
Yeah. And they want to see everybody thrive, right? They want to see farmers thrive, baristas thrive, but I think that they're falling short into highlighting anything else than bigger companies at those trade shows. I think that the smallholders and like the regular barista that doesn't work for a multinational or something like that is just always excluded, whether it be for price, for visa purposes, where the expos are, and all those types of things. I think this is where the SCA is truly falling short, because they could use all that power to, even if not, like in the example of like they cannot donate the proceeds from Dubai. I didn't know that this was just like a license or like a franchise, right? But they could have raised awareness. There's a lot of other crises in other producing countries, like the Tigray situation, genocide in Ethiopia, the mining industry in the DRC, they produce coffee there. What's happening in Haiti right now? There's so many things that are coffee related for non-coffee reasons, in a sense, because they're producing countries. And I think this is where I would see a global organization to be more involved into that type of stuff, you know? And honestly, I'm not sure if the SCA at this point can be reformed, because it's basically owned by such big corporations. And just the Coffee Science Foundation sponsoring, being sponsored by Keurig, I think, just to run like a farmer study about like how we can do better for them. I just think this is not the way to go. And I think this is just performative.
And there is a blowback. If you're listening to this and you're hearing what David's saying and you're hearing what I'm saying and you're like, yes, I align with that, well, you have to understand that the price that you have to pay for that is that you have to consider that competitions are a way that you prop up these organizations. Competitions prop up the SCA, they prop up their sponsors. Going to these trade shows does the same thing. Now, I'm not saying you shouldn't do those things, but if we're talking about being values driven, you have to pay a price as well. And that's why values driven businesses take longer to be successful, is because you have to stand by your values. I haven't said this before, but we're not going to be at World of Coffee in Dubai next year. And I'm not going to go into why, but Map It Forward is not going to be at World of Coffee Dubai in 2025. And that is as a result of me having to stand by my values. That's a really hard decision to make, given that we were the official podcast for the last 2 years. Now, that's not saying anything against the city of Dubai or the government of the UAE. I love living here, but it is a deeper statement about the show.
Which I think more people should be doing.
Now, I want to be very clear. I take a business hit for that. They don't pay me. They have never paid me. It costs me to be at World of Coffee. But it is a benefit because it means I get brand awareness, right?
Yeah.
I'm going to have to take the hit to that and have to find different ways to do that in 2025 that do align with my values. And that means that most likely another podcast is going to go in there and they're going to be like, awesome, this Map It Forward chick is out of the way. I'm going to get my opportunity to be at World of Coffee Dubai. And I wish you all the luck. But I'm not going to be there.
But that's the stand that you have to take for the sake of your own values. And I know this segment is really long, but this is one of the quotes that really hit me from a poet named Cole Arthur Riley. Mm-hmm. She runs an Instagram account called Black Liturgies. Beautiful, beautiful account. Mm-hmm. And there's one quote. I don't know if it's from a poet that she quoted or her own quote. So I'll check that later. But the quote goes something like this. Be worried of allies who are more interested in understanding the blood that comes from the womb and are not willing to give the privilege and the wealth that is coming from said womb and exploitation. And they said true allyship for your values costs something. There's just no way around it. And you have to take that stand.
And that is the perfect place to end what is, I think, the episode of the series so far. So join us for the next episode, folks, the final in this series. You are such an asset to this industry, David. You really are.
Thanks for saying that. It doesn't always feel that way, but I'm glad I can connect with people that think so.
Yeah. So join us for the next episode, folks. And in the final episode, we're going to talk about where does the coffee industry go from here. Peace, love, and peanut butter. Have an amazing rest of your day. I really hope you enjoyed this episode, friends. Please don't forget to show us some love by subscribing, liking, commenting, and most of all, sharing this podcast with your friends. Check the show notes for links, including our sponsors and our Patreon. And stay tuned for more great conversations on the Daily Coffee Pro by Map It Forward.